Guyana, me Guyana, land of many waters with 6 races living together.
Globespan is a Guyanese dialogue moving towards the realization of one nation in one Guyana. It's a platform that offers an all-inclusive discussion, with the pros, the cons, the ones that is taken aside, and the ones that stand in the middle. Globespan believes agreeing and disagreeing are part of the nation's building. Globespan believes that every Guyanese voice is part of the nation's building. As we span the globe for voices from the diasporas and those living home, we stand on our commitment that we are all Guyanese working towards one nation in one Guyana.
Coffee and Dr. Jagan, Bobby, she gave us our great sons. Rohan Kanhai, Coffee and Dr. Jagan.
As the world turns on its axis bringing changes, we as Guyanese must adopt to those changes for a better Guyana for all. Globespan stands on its axis with its belief that one nation, one Guyana, one destiny must include voices from all corners of Guyana.
Me Guyana, land of many waters with 6 races living together.
Okay, so welcome viewers to another edition of Globespan24x7, owned and operated by Mr. Nohar Singh, with Mr. Devin Bisoon as our technical operator. Tonight, Wednesday, we are discussing recent United Nations reports and recent U.S. visitors to Guyana. We are going to discuss their implications for Guyana. Joining us tonight on the panel are Mr. G.H.K. Lal and Mr. Vince Adams. Just to introduce them very, very quickly, Dr. Vincent Adams is no stranger to Guyana. He served on the EPA, Environmental Agency in Guyana, Environmental Protective Protection Agency in Guyana, has served there for a long time. He also worked in the United States for a couple of decades. At top United States positions on environmental matters. He also held high positions in the United States. And we have Mr. G.H.K. Lal, who worked at Wall Street for a number of years. He's an excellent economic financial analyst, currently based in Guyana, and is no stranger to this show as well as to Guyana. He's a frequent commentator, letter writer, columnist in the Guyana papers. Gentlemen, thank you very much for taking your very invaluable time to join us to discuss this very, very important topic. There is supposed to have been a third speaker panelist tonight he had a certain emergency and cannot participate to join the conversation tonight. So, gentlemen, thank you for taking your time off again, and let's begin the conversation. So there probably still is recent visitors to Guyana, and there was also recent United Nations reports on Guyana on human rights. So let's just have a little background, if you don't mind. Mr. GHK, could you give us a little background about this United Nations human rights, if you're au fait on it?
Well, the United Nations Human Rights Committee, Council, so to speak, came about in December 1966. And what we're going to talk about tonight is this covenant, the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights that came about, or became effective in 1976. And there are these periodic visits to the countries that are signatories to that human rights body, so to speak, and to the articles of them, which focus primarily on liberty, covers things like the death penalty, freedom of conscience, freedom of religion, freedom of ideas. And you're going to hear that a lot, our fellow Guyanese and whoever else is listening tonight, in that freedom and the independence to express oneself in the context of one's country, in our case, Guyana, and to do so without fear, to do so without restraint. And those are the underpinnings, some of them, non-discrimination, media freedom, that prompted the visit. I think it was due now. It's several years apart. It was due now, and certainly it kicked up a storm of controversy here from the government side and from the commentator side. And it's worth looking into again what came out of it and what was left behind in terms of and I have a document here that says advance on edited version, which is about 13 pages long, from the committee itself. It identifies a number of areas which I think it serves the public well to have an understanding, to have a hearing of what went on and where it was left.
So the UN Human Rights Commission, just as a little more background, is based in Geneva, Switzerland. And as you rightly stated, it issues these periodic reports. It does not target any specific countries. It did not target Guyana. It does so for several countries. And as you said, it's done periodically and not every year per se. And so each country has a turn about investigation of its human rights record. And in this particular case, Guyana and other countries were selected for investigation and discussion, as well as questioning of the government figures about these findings of the report, if I'm correct. Dr. Vince Adams, you have anything to add about the background of
just I think GHK covered it pretty well. The intervals are normally 5 years, and they have now transitioned over to an 8-year interval. So this year is the start of the first 8-year cycle. And what has happened here, and the reason why it has never really caught the attention and the publicity that it's getting before now, again, is because of Guyana is now in the limelight of the world. So all eyes are looking at Guyana, and so that is why, because of the attention that we're getting, that more people are paying attention to us, and it's really a big deal now. And to be honest, I think the government, instead of using it as an opportunity, I don't think they realize the magnitude of the importance of answering the questions appropriately. I don't think the government of Guyana took it very seriously, and I think I hope that they've come to realize it, because it's very serious. This here is it's the the United Nations forum that we're dealing with, the largest institution in the world, and they take these things very seriously. The only thing that my good friend there, GHK, didn't mention was he called everything else, except that another focus was anti-corruption. So hopefully it's going to be a lessons learned for Guyana and the Guyana government, and hopefully they're going to take it seriously. As a matter of fact, the two opposition parties, if you will, the AFC and APNU, have already made public statements that they intend to adopt the recommendations of the United States Human Rights Committee report. If I had to advise the PPPC government, I would advise them that they do the same and implement those plans that are in place, to at least show that they're serious and they're making an effort, because I think the recommendations are sound, and to have a better Guyana.
So let's talk about some of the findings of the UN Human Rights Report. GHK, you want to give us some of those?
Yeah. Well, it started out by recognizing right up front, the positives in terms of some laws And there were several of them, and I'm just going to give a couple. The Combating of Trafficking in Persons Act, the Data Protection Act, the Restorative Justice Act, the Bail Act, Mental Health Protection and Promotion Act, Constitutional Reform Commission Act of 2022, and there were a number of those more, and the Commission had cause to say, this is a good thing. These are good things. You've got a legislative framework. You've made a start with this, and this is encouraging. However, it says, and it used the words, gentlemen and our listeners, it throughout the report, in just about every area. Quite rightly, Dr. Adams, anti-corruption, discrimination or non-discrimination, freedom, death penalty, freedom of speech, and all those human rights that we love to talk about, the rights of man. There were some words that I had to use in another program that come straight out of the report. We are concerned. We are calling for independent and impartial presences, bodies, frameworks, agencies to bring about changes in these areas that have been found lacking based on reports to the contrary, that it's not as it should be. As a signatory to the covenant, to this body, Guyana was expected, like any other country, and it wasn't singled out. I think it's part of the rotation that occurred this year. It's expected that we will adhere to the covenants, Articles 1 through whatever. And there are dozens of articles there. And clearly, the committee members, there are 18 independent members, some of them were pretty candid in their, shall I say, comments, which I interpreted to be critical of what was happening here, the state party, and that is a cause of discomfort for me. I can say that corruption, we have written about that and spoken about that at length here and in other forums, paper and electronic, and corruption is killing us. Corruption is killing us, and straight out of the report it says, we are concerned that there needs to be a framework around this for robust implementation of A and B and C and follow-up and checks and balances, and the words independent and impartial kept repeating themselves over and over again. Concern, concern, concern. They talked about a National Human Rights Commission chair, that there's a need for that to be present. There's a need for that to be functional. There's a need for these bodies, whatever they are, anti-corruption, non-discrimination, human rights, they need to be properly funded. They need to be properly staffed. They need to have checks and balances. They need to prepare reports and to be responded to. Things of this nature. Personally speaking, I can tell you about freedom. Freedom, we've had free and fair elections, a wonderful thing. We know about what went on and what came about. We know where we are with that. I think that we have a lot of ground to cover in terms of freedom. The government must be free from fear that when we talk here, whoever speaks here, a government man, an opposition man, an independent man, and I think, unfortunately, as far as the government is concerned, there's no independent man. You're either PPP or you're PNC. And if you're PNC, you can't be PPP. I will never, ever subscribe to such nonsense from anybody. The PPNC doesn't own me. The PPP will never own me. None of the two can ever own me. Here's my story. I own me, right? Even God, sometimes I got a little difference with it, if people will excuse that sacrilege. Hear me think. I question God, so I can't question whoever they be. Here's my thing. Freedom. We must be free to write. We must be free to express. The Articles 18, 19, and 20 of the Covenant, civil and political rights, speaks about freedom of thought, freedom of ideas, freedom of expression. Gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen listening, we must, anybody, whether you are against the opposition or for the government, or against the government and for the opposition, you must be able to do so without restraint, but within bounds, within the bounds of propriety, within civilized bounds, within the bounds of normal, respectful, courteous conversation. Those are mandatory elements. This thing about, leaders degrading citizens they find to be deviationists and to be critics, that's a healthy part of a democracy. I can tell you for a fact, and I think you guys know, and some of our audience knows, that for writing and saying it shouldn't be this way, why is it not this way? And for that, all kinds of odious things have been plastered upon me. So where is my freedom? Where is my freedom? I can say in public that I have taken steps out of Guyana to have my story be told and to have it told raw. And I want the government to hear this. I think it knows this, and it's not the first time I'm saying this, that the slanders that have been aimed at me from deep inside of the government should be known, and it should not be what has happened. And I am not the only one this is. I am not an activist. I am not a political participant. I am a social commentator. I'm a citizen with a conscience who finds things that I say, why is it this way and why is it not this way? And that's my thing, because I think, and I could be wrong, I think that if it's this way, then we'll have a better Guyana. We'll have better relationships. So the freedom to think along those lines about oil, about governance, about leadership, those should never be taken away from me or be attempted to be taken away from me by trying to intimidate me. This is why the United Nations Human Rights Committee came to Guyana, because other people spoke about that, because there have been reports about that. There's an optional protocol in the covenant that empowers the UNHRC to investigate individual complaints. To investigate, that's the optional part of the covenant. I have not filed a complaint with the United Nations body, but I have done some different things to give this thing the publicity when it needs to be. I have known people who are in the media, and I'm a media contributor. I'm not a media worker. I don't get paid for this. I do public service work. But I know people who are media professionals, women, who have been lambasted and denied and insulted and humiliated publicly for doing what? For asking a hard question and a persistent question about oil and gas. Should not be. This is what the United Nations was particularly exercised about, and for which I think that the government, the answers were not so, were not persuasive. They were not persuasive at all. In the area of, and I'm going to jump here, let Dr. Adams come in the area of police efficiency and SOCU, I think, as the United Nations said, and I've had dealings with these people when I was in the Gold Board, that they can be better. They can be better. Going back, sticking at the police, when I made a report to the one who is being attacked, made a report to the police cyber crimes unit, the senior man there said to me, "Man, why are you taking this thing seriously?" I said, "How do you mean why I'm taking this thing seriously?" He said, who do you think is behind this? And I called some names, and they're in the cabinet. And they're in the, call one of those offices. They're there. So why should we at that level be engaging in the scurrilous? Why are you imprisoning my right? You are abrogating my right to freedom of ideas, to freedom of expression, to freedom of association, either on this program or wherever it may be. Wherever it may be. So the police has to be more proactive, it has to be more efficient, and it has to be more independent. So more is on the corruption side, and I have a good idea what's going on there, but that's beyond my ability to speak to effectively here. So freedom of expression is big for me. Extrajudicial killings. There have been reports of that, and the United Nations was pretty concerned about that, and it registered its. All of this is in the unedited advanced version, 13 pages of them. The government, I thought, came, as some people said, ill-prepared. I do not know how do you prepare for things that. How do you prepare for me? What are you going to tell me? I'm making up things? When the vice president himself, a former president, is there doing what he's doing? How can he come about and say, I hear, so he heard from somebody who must have heard it 100 times, rumors. I mean, you're peddling rumors, man. You are peddling rumors, but he ain't going there. I ain't got nothing to do with that. But you just put that bomb out there. So what game are you playing, sir? This is, don't get cute with me. I'm pretty good with the English language. So, and the vice president can never come to that level. So let's get that straight. I'm saying this publicly. So if you've got something, there are the authorities. There's the attorney general, the DPP, the crime chief, the whomever. Don't attack people to intimidate them into silence. And that's what the United Nations was concerned about. And that's what is in these papers here in different areas. And extrajudicial killing, we've had our controversies about that going back. And recently a man shot in his bed and they put a gun in his hand or said he had a gun under his pillow or something like that. That was in Dartmouth, SQ. These things, the police needs to be reined in. The police needs to be independent and focus on doing its job, free of politicization. These are things that violate the human rights of citizens, whether they're environmental activists like Danuta Radzik, Janet Bulkan, Miss Radzik's sister, Elizabeth Dean. We must be free to say, look, man, I got a problem with something here, whether it's a gas pipeline or let them be denied in a legitimate way, judicial manner. But don't try to overpower people. And that, because that's rights here, sacred rights, sacred human rights. In human rights, the rights of people are being suppressed. And that is wrong. And I don't think, with due respect to Mr. Shearer, that she was ready for any of this. I looked at what the government put out and I'm like, my God, is this all you're capable of? People are hurting. People are fearful. We hear about people who are supposed to come on programs like these, not necessarily this one, and we want to know why they're not here. Not necessarily tonight, and I'm not hedging anything. And you want to know, what are they reluctant about? I did not use the word fearful. What are they reluctant about? Come and have your say. Let's have an honest conversation about the issues. No personalities, Don't come here with a hatchet behind your back to ambush somebody. Let that person speak, let me speak, let you speak, let the moderate, and we go from there. And this is what, we are not a communist country. I would like to think that. But if we're going to talk about a democracy, then we got to behave like one. We've got to look to how to refine the ideas. Gentlemen, I know I have spoken at length here. I apologize for that. but I needed to
But
put it out there, and that's what it's about.
But well, you got an ample amount of time, so we'll give Vince an ample amount of time as well. Vince, you want to add anything about the report? You want to
Yeah.
comment on what GHK stated?
Sure. I don't think I can ever match GHK for sure. That's a big shoe to fill. But just to, let me touch on some things here as far as credibility is concerned. And I know that like I said, to me, the government did not take this seriously. And when they were confronted with the questions, they decided to confront the questioners, and they started calling the questions inappropriate and odd. And the people had to let them know, here, we did our homework. And they went, even, I think it's at least 3 of them, had to explain to them the process where they did their research. And it was not just pulling stuff out of the air, just listening. If somebody comes in with a complaint, they went and did their research. A good example, closer to home for me, Mr. Teixeira, MP Teixeira, went there and lied. I mean, just flat out lied about me. She was asked her questions, and I don't know, but again, when you're not prepared, something comes into your head. She lied that somehow I was the one who wrote the contract, the oil and gas contract. I was the one who was responsible, and I was the one who was responsible for hiding the $18 million signing bonus without, just flat out lie. And then when she was given a chance the next day, she dug in and said, well, here I am. I was there at the EPA, and I had no problems with implementing the contract, but somehow, we can't. The contract is now legal, so we can't change it. So it's okay for me not to implement the contract, but it's okay for them to implement the bad contract. So that, that was a typical example, and of course, it got a lot of press coverage. But
and you're saying you didn't write the contract?
Absolutely not. But here's the other part there. Here's the other, the bizarre thing about that lie is that I was working for the United States government at the highest level of the U.S. government with national security clearance, and this woman was placing me working for another government. In 2016, June 2016, when the contract was signed, I was still working for the U.S. government. It puts me at risk for a lot of reasons. As a matter of fact, hopefully the U.S. government wouldn't take her seriously. But no, absolutely I never signed, never had it. We all talk about the contract. I got on programs. As a matter of fact, I was forced to criticize the contract before that became something popular. You can go check the front page of the Kaichor News on February 4th of 2018. There was a headline there that said that I was calling for renegotiation and a signing bonus of $1 billion. So I was the first one who came out before it became popular and criticizing the contract. So I don't know how I could have been.
And the 18 million, just for clarification.
The 18 million was a signing bonus. You remember the infamous 18 million that the charges were that it was hidden, because when they asked the minister, the finance minister, he said he didn't know anything about it, and then it came out that so that's why they call it the hidden $18 million. And you hear about it. It comes up from time to time by the vice president. But so there was this $18 million somehow that was hidden in that they claimed it was hidden in a bank account someplace. So I was the one who hid it there. Basically, that's what you said. And I was the one responsible for signing the contract. But again, it shows the unseriousness. The first thing that you notice, and anyone who pays attention to these type of things in terms of especially when you're leading your country, one of the first things you do, you look at optics. here, this year, like I said, it's probably the biggest, not probably the biggest institution in the world. You're going to be invited to go to Geneva to discuss this. Well, the UN thought it was serious, but you decide to sit at home and do it by Skype or Zoom or whatever they did it. And then behind her, she got an entire I don't know, like maybe about 20 people, it seems like. And then here's a guy in I think it was in military uniform, but he sitting behind, and you couldn't miss him. So I don't know what that was for, but there was this guy in his, what is he doing there to start with? Here's this guy in this uniform, either military or police, but the guy was well dressed out in his attire. So immediately you know that. And then when the questions started coming, well, here was the other thing that Gail Teixeira said. Well, you guys just bombarded, basically, just bombarded me with questions, not giving me any time to respond. Well, all of the issues were posted on the UN site for like 6 weeks before the conference. Again, that signals to everybody that they probably never looked at the question. They never looked at the issues, but they're just going to go out there and hey, we're going to sit there and have a nice time for 3 days. And they had a rude awakening. So that was what happened. Now, to get to some of the specifics, and GSK covered some of those, and one of the big ones for me too is this whole freedom of expression. We see every single week with the vice president what happens at this press conference. We've had an incident here recently where one of the major newspapers reporters walked out. That should never happen, and it has never ceased. It's just the way that they responded to, and they're intimidated. I remember at that same newspaper, a couple of reporters, they had started a program, and they got scandalized, and they had to abandon the program. So those are the kinds of things that the UN saw and expressed grave concerns about, that you're asking to fix. Now, one of the other things that in terms of specifics, the committee, they were concerned about reports of lack of transparency. And these were their words, by the way: lack of transparency, corruption, and accountability in the management of the natural resources, particularly, these are their words, the oil and gas sector. So again, we've seen all kinds of stories, in terms of, even when you look at who are getting contracts and budgets, and in terms of inclusion, that's a major issue that that concerns them. The other thing is, in terms of inclusion, the environment, again, which is near and dear to my heart, inadequate prior environmental and social impacts assessment and meaningful participation, especially by the communities that are impacted, such as the Amerindian communities. That was a big part of the concern in terms of the indigenous population, in terms of how they're participating in the decision making. And we all know what has happened in recent time with the administration. They've waived almost every single environmental impact assessment. That's not a secret anymore, and it's caused lawsuits from people, like citizens such as Razak, and I think I got the name, might have the name incorrect there,
Razik.
but Razik and our hero lawyer, Melinda Janke, who's been fighting these battles. So those are some of the specifics that they're concerned about, especially the oil and gas, because that's what's driving our economy, and that's where the opportunities are for corruption. So they obviously have paid attention to that. And of course, the environment, you can't separate, the impacts in the environment, because a lot of times folks cut corners and to make money while damaging and compromising the environment. A good example which I and others have been battling. And one of the things is implementation of the environmental regulations. That was a concern expressed again in their exact word. We've got the production. Let's the forest project, the LISA 1 project, for example. Now, the environmental impact assessment, it's the only official document that has all of the comprehensive analysis. You look at all the technical details if you want to have the technical details of a project. And the main thing it looks for is, of course, the impact on the environment based on various analysis and scenarios if things occur. But it's the Bible, because you look at all the risk, you look at how do you mitigate against the risk, how do you respond if something happens. So you never ever go against the EIA. That we call it the Bible in the environmental world. Here we are with the environmental impact that says for the LISA 1, it says in very clear language, the safe operating limit shall be 120,000 barrels per day. And when you put a safe, because one of the things of the EIA is to establish a safety envelope. So anytime you see a safety limit set in an EIA, you don't even want to get close to it. So here's the other number that is in there, which is a normal thing, is that when you set a limit for that 120, your operating limit, you always cut it back, your internal control, so that you wouldn't get close to that safety limit. You cut it back by about 20%. So guess what's also in that EIA? That the operating limit shall be 100,000 barrels per day. So, and that's just because you don't want to get to that safe. You don't even want to come close, okay? You want to be always in safe. Because countries such as the United States, if you touch that safe operating limit, you're out of business, most likely, unless there's something that you didn't have control over. Do you know what that project is operating at? You won't believe it. 160,000 barrels per day. And the same exact thing is happening with all of the projects.
But was that in the UN report? I don't think that was in the UN report.
They had the details, but they did not put those details in the report. But the report was based on a lot of details. But that was one of the things that drove the
in looking overall. I mean, do you think, both of you, do you think the UN report was fair, objective? Were there things that they went overboard on?
I don't even think I thought that, which is what you just said. I thought it was. As a matter of fact, I thought it was more than fair. And they probably, to me anyway, if I was writing, it probably would have gone even further in terms of even some specifics. But that's okay. You know, that was the purpose of the report. But nevertheless, it still does not diminish the message presented in that report. I thought it was more than fair. I thought it was thorough, and I thought that they did their homework as they made clear to the government. So I thought it was a fair and comprehensive report.
You brought up, before I go to GHK, you brought up the issue of the EPA approval. This government gave approval to Exxon and whoever else for their operations, but so did the preceding government. So it wouldn't be fair to criticize this one and not the preceding government as well, because both of them gave approval on everything.
No, that there's not the approval. It's not the approval. Their thing was inadequate implementation. It's the implementation, right? Because, for example, when I was there at the EPA, for example, you know, I came up with this whole thing about making sure that we've got adequate coverage just in case we have a spill. I call it the full liability coverage, which means that you have the company, Exxon, has to cover a spill if anything happens, right? Because the Exxon, let me make this clear to the audience, because I'm pretty sure that a lot of audience do not understand. Exxon name is not on any document. Let me repeat that. Exxon name is not on any official document, meaning they have no liability whatsoever. What those companies such as Exxon do, they brought in, they went and they created a limited liability company, which is now it's Exxon Mobil Guyana Limited, but that has no assets whatsoever. Matter of fact, all of the assets and here's the other thing that that when I hear the vice president keep spouting this nonsense about we can seize their assets if a spill occur. The fact of the matter is they have no assets. All of those assets that they're accumulating belong to the government of Guyana. It's clear in the agreement. As a matter of fact, the agreement even says that upon termination of the contract for whatever reason, you have to turn over all those assets over to us. They're being paid out of the cost, out of the money generated by the oil. So here it is that when I was there in the coalition, we did sign the agreement, the permit. However, the permit says, "Thou shalt." One of the things we did since the subsidiary or the subsidiary company, which is EMGL, does not have any assets to cover the spill. We said, if a spill occurs, Exxon, you need to sign a parent company guarantee to say that you will cover that spill, because
yeah, I mean, it is an important subject, but we're drifting away from the topic.
No, but my point was, the point that I want to get is you brought up the
approval.
Both sides signing, but it's not the signing of the permit, it's the implementation. Because when the coalition left office now, what did the government, what did the PPP government did? They abandoned that, and of course that's what caused that lawsuit to occur when Judge Kissoon ruled in favor of what it was in place before. So it's about the implementation. It's not about what you sign. It's about the implementation of what's in the permit or not. And so that's the big difference. That's the big difference.
Let's hear GHK. Do you think the report was fair and balanced and objective, or do you think it went overboard in critiquing and assailing the government?
Well, look at this. I was a junior public servant in Guyana, and you folks have some good ideas about government. Dr. Adams, you worked for the U.S. government and for the government of Guyana. I was at the Gold Board for 3 years, just recently, 4 years ago. Official documents, Dr. B, and I'm pretty sure you're familiar with it, there's a certain blandness to them. They're very conservative. Even when they have specifics, they're formal, the language is restrained, and they're to the point of even being officious. So I would say that yes, it was fair, it was conservative, and it did not go overboard. Now, I want to add a few things, if I may, if we have time.
Please do.
Taking this thing away from the discrete areas covered in the closing comments. Guyana is under the microscope of the world for good reasons. It is the place to be. It is where we are thinking of putting our money. Are you talking about $100 million US? You're talking about some investment fund that has shares in Exxon or Chevron, like Vanguard or Fidelity, State Street Asset Management, and you're talking about billions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of ExxonMobil shares. I mean, they're among the top shareholders. So these people, they want to make money. So the managers get paid, and the people who put money in them can get a nice, handsome return. This is outside of Exxon itself and Chevron and Hess. Chevron is not here yet. So what kind of place is this Guyana? Who's this guy GHK Lal? Let me know Dr. Vincent Adams and Dr. Vishnu Misra. Itpada G. Today, in Geneva, some people are there from Itpada G. I mean, you go after them and you withhold their subvention after years. ITPADG, the International Decade of African
People of African, yeah.
Descent in Guyana and so on and so forth. Okay, you use that. Okay, doesn't mean I agree. But then you say there's people are paying themselves. They're volunteers and they do not collect a salary. Then you say somebody engaged in fraud, and I think there's a $50 million lawsuit pending against the vice president. I said, you know, Mr. Alexander, you should withdraw that. I have been attacked, and I said you should, and I didn't go. People tell me I should sue, and I said no. Dr. Adams is right here, and he has indicated he's getting ready to sue Gail Teixeira. And I say, as much as you've got grounds, we all have grounds, let us not use the weapon that the government has used. I say, this is not Jesus talking. This is me saying, if we're going to get anywhere, let us show that we can reach that higher ground, that tough ground that has been so elusive to us. This has got nothing about religion in it, gentlemen, so let's get that straight. This is about a place of civility, a place of decency, that we need to be there. The vice president has every right to be critical of people who are critical of his policies and of his government, but he must do so from a foundation of fairness, a foundation of truth, a foundation of principle. Don't go around calling people names and alleging this and that, or his people doing that without basis, to cow them into silence, to make them go away. Some people will not go away, Dr. Bisram. Some people like me, the worst thing you can do is bear false witness against me. I am gonna come after you. And that's what these are the things that get ventilated in the press. I'm not on social media. And these are the things that the United Nations, they have a resident representative here. I mean, these people are not sleeping. They're not knocking back cocktails at the Marriott or Pegasus Daily. They've got serious work to do. And so they did their research, as we hear. And so there's a pattern here. When people are being pushed against a wall for expressing their opinions. And I think that the United Nations Human Rights Committee unedited final draft comments, 13 pages of it, I thought they were eminently fair, and that they were, I agree with Dr. Adams, they were conservative in substance. But that's the nature of these types of reports. We have got to be concerned, and I'm sure that the government is concerned. I hear that anxiety about the optics of this now that we are in the global spotlight. Therefore, it is incumbent upon the government, the vice president, the president, Ms. Teixeira, to be cognizant of how they comport themselves and how they communicate in the crucible of controversy. They must be able to manage themselves. They must be able to take a punch. And if they've got a counter punch, they must do so not below the belt. They must do so to your face and, according to the rules. And I think the rules are that there are no rules. And that's the problem here. So anything goes. And so then you have the United Nations having to come for its thing and say, well, we know about this and this and this and that. And you have Ms. Teixeira looking with egg all over her face and trying to defend the indefensible. And I don't know what they're going to make about this, but we cannot afford to look lousy, sleazy, and measly at this point in our existence.
All right, let's just move on to the second topic of discussion, the recent visits of high-profile visitors from the United States. Either one of you want to give us a little background? Who are the people who came to Guyana? and why do you feel or felt they came? Vincent?
Well, I know that we had folks from the State Department and it doesn't surprise me, and I'm not keeping track of them because it doesn't surprise me again because and the way that we all were trained that level of the U.S. government is to look after, how do we keep America competitive? And one of the ways of keeping America competitive, especially a country such as Guyana that has the resource that we need, we ought to see how we can establish a relationship, a long-term relationship, by the way. And the way you do that, the other thing that you were trained to do is not to sit in your office and read newspapers, is to go and look the folks in their eyes and figure out who they are, how they're thinking. Because again, like I said, this here is the long term. And and if you put the Guyana and the US government, in terms of interest, obviously we've got our oil, and that's energy is very important to the US, especially with all the turmoil that is going on across the world. What's happening in the Middle East. So it's important that anytime you get an opportunity, here it is Guyana, this is this new opportunity. So we're going to see, this is just the start of folks coming down here. But the most important thing that we have got to understand, they're not just coming here, according to what GHK said, is to go sit at the Marriott and knock a few glasses. They're checking out the folks that they can trust. They want to see who the individuals, who are the players, and what are their policies, what are their thinking and their behavior, so that they can establish and go back and strategize and set policies. And could they form a partnership, a long-term partnership, and set policies based on these things? So that's what they're trying to figure out. Who are the players involved, and to understand, what are they about? So this here is, and it's not just one set of people. You're going to see people from all angles, because like the United States economy is built upon, it has, we got a bunch of agencies and departments, and you're going to see folks coming from each and every one of those departments, because it's an integrated effort. So it's a good thing. But then at the same time, I hope that we comport ourselves proper and understand that it's about building this partnership, which is, by the way, that partnership with the US is very important to us too. And we would like to build that long-term trust.
So just for clarification, the United States, like any other nation, is interested in promoting, securing its national interests. The United States is capable of doing that from its own territory. It doesn't need to go to other places, but it came because they want to have direct face-to-face conversation and discussion of how best to secure and protect the American homeland, the American national interest. And among the high-profile visitors were those from the State Department, the Central Intelligence Agency, the Armed Forces, people from Southern Command also came. We have members of Congress who come to Guyana very frequently. I'm not certain, but I think at some point in time we did have someone from the FBI, or a number of forces from the FBI. And there are marshals, U.S. marshals, that frequently come to Guyana as well. GHK, anything to add to what Vincent Adams said about these high-profile visitors?
Well, let's put this in context here. Guyana is the place to be. Guyana is in the United States backyard, so to speak. Guyana is next door to Venezuela. Those alone are factors that count in the United States strategization. When you throw in OPEC Plus and Prince, is it Bin Salman? Yeah, and the shift.
MBS.
Yeah, as opposed to when Bandar was there. Remember, they used to fet him in Crawford, Texas, and all this business. And America was the place for the Saudi Arabians in terms of their business and relationships and their military hardware and so on. Now with this new crown prince, the shift is more towards India and China, and those appetites for oil and oil products are huge, almost insatiable. Now, you come here and we found 11 billion barrels of oil, and I think it's more than that. And we've got the convenience of geography. Let's understand that one thing that the three of us have in common is that we have lived for decades in the United States. There's a saying on Wall Street that I think has got, we can put all the emails together, exchange them between us. We can have all the phone conversations, but very early in the relationship, we need to put a face to the voice. So we've got to shake hands, we've got to press the flesh. And what is doing there, what is happening there is there's this, it's not necessarily psyching out, but it's the measurement. Do I want to do business with this man? That is very important to me. Do I want to do business with these people? In this instance, the people are President Ali, Vice President Jagdeo, for the most part. The rest are the rest, right? These are the people that are going to be dealing with. So you have Director Burns, you have former President Bill Clinton, you have a general, a four-star this, and an admiral, and whomever else. And I think you had Tony Blair too from the
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. Some French minister, I think it's slated, and so on and so forth. So don't be surprised if you were to see a Chinese vice premier coming here. Okay, now let's stick to the US. Bill Clinton has got a network of people with deep pockets. Outside of himself, he's prospecting. Gentlemen, put on our business hats. He is prospecting. What are the investment opportunities that are available in Guyana for his people? Of course, they're not going to get into the nitty-gritty of terms, but for us to have a Bill Clinton here, a former US president, two-term president, that's a feather in our cap. He wouldn't have had the time of day for us before. I remember during the elections at one time, I'm pretty sure he said this, well, again, these people are going to have to decide for themselves as to what kind of country they're going to have. Now, we have no say in what kind of country we're going to have, or we have, according to the Americans. Good. Not good from that perspective, but that's where things are. So you get him coming, and he's about business. That's where I say it. Of course, because of his political lineage, the man doesn't operate on an island. He's not a hermit. So he's going to come and have his conversations that have the cover that they are not official, but there's going to have some official train to them that he can share back with Anthony Blinken. And I'm sure he's a full call away from President Biden, especially they're from the same political party. Coming to William Joseph Burns, we need to go back and appreciate what this man's career was. He was a top U.S. diplomat with a 32-year tenure in the U.S. Foreign Service. He was the U.S. ambassador to Moscow. He was ambassador to someplace else, I can't remember now. But as CIA director, he has been entrusted with sensitive missions to either boost U.S. profile or to be, how shall I say, a high-profile messenger. He's gone to China in a tough time with U.S.-China relationship. He's gone to Putin's Russia in a tough time over Ukraine and so on and so forth that we all know. So William J. Burns, director of the CIA, is a man that is highly, highly respected, not so much for his spook ways, for his spy ways, but for his ambassadorial and diplomatic skills. He comes here, and yes, we've got our Venezuelan menace controversy, and I'm sure that was a part of the conversation. But at the same time, he is a trusted envoy to bring specific messages from his government. He has done this before. The White House has used him for this before. When he was confirmed, gentlemen, when he was confirmed, listeners, it was unanimous. It was a voice vote. There was no controversy over this man's, appointment for what was it, the CIA director, which is a sensitive position in and of itself. And so he's got this kind of universal political context and backing in a Washington that is at war with itself. So he comes here, tells me Venezuela is a part of that, the White House is a part of that, and the foggy bottom, the State Department, is a part of that. So he had a number of messages to convey here to our president and his team. And again, go back to Palmerston political science, Dr. Bishram and Dr. Adams. We have no permanent friends. We have permanent interests, and that hasn't changed, Monroe Doctrine or not. We've got oil, and oil is of interest to the United States government. Yes, they've got the Permian Basin, and it's the leading producer of oil right now. But Guyana's oil, and with 8 discoveries in the bag, and more to come in that Arabian Nights Stabroek block, right? I say Arabian Nights because it's so, the thing is out of legend, right? So we are a gem in United States relationships now, when it is not looked too kindly upon even by its allies. So that's why you get all these high-profile visitors. And to your point, Dr. Adams, which I'm sure you subscribe to, Dr. Bisram, we're going to have more of these guys here. At one time, I expected the vice president, Ms. Harris, but right now they're busy with elections and so on and so forth. But definitely, we're going to have more of these guys.
So, Vincent, do you have anything else to add? And then
you cannot overemphasize, and you cannot overemphasize the importance of meeting in person. Here is the concept. The concept, as a matter of fact, we've done, well, not me, but in the U.S. government, we've done studies that, and that's the reason why you do interviews, by the way, because let's say you apply for a job. You can sit in your office and just go and select the person with the best academic qualification and experience. You got to ask the psychologists and those folks who did the study. But the numbers came out to be two-thirds of the reason why you choose somebody is based upon your personal interaction with them. So when you have an interview, that accounts for two-thirds of that rating. So that's to give you the importance and where and the culture from where these folks are coming. But I agree with everything GHK said there.
Excellent, thank you. So gentlemen, I just have 4 questions to ask each one of you, and if you could just, as minimal time as possible, a minute, maximum 2. And the following questions: new oil and gas discoveries in Guyana. Why do you think there was a failure to disclose them promptly, timely?
Well, you mean the new discoveries? Oh,
yeah, the new discoveries. Yeah.
Yes. I of course I've said this publicly. I used to be a petroleum engineer, by the way, and I used to be on those drill rigs, and I used to do some preliminary calculation while you're there and they're drilling, because you've got to decide whether they should complete that well or not. So as they're logging it, you're getting information and you're doing a basic calculation, and then the next day you go to the office and you refine it. So there's no excuse whatsoever to be taking 2 years. And what was interesting was before, when they got to the 11 billion barrels, apparently after every single well was discovered, we were getting an update. So there's something there, but the reason is there are too many questions that are being ask. And I believe that somehow, the government does not want to disclose these numbers because they do not want people to challenge them to say, what are you doing with the money? Because that's where the questions are going. Here we're getting all this money. What are you doing with it? So the more all you get, the more questions and the more interest you get from folks. And I believe in terms of transparency, I think that's the problem. Huh?
The oil is not coming out now from the new discoveries. It'll come out probably in 2 or 3 years' time. GHK, your response?
Well, yes. If you tell me, forget about 8 discoveries. If you tell me we've discovered oil, and that's all you say, you didn't say anything about exciting, significant, or unprecedented or anything. We have discovered oil. The fact that you've made a discovery tells me it's not a dry hole. It's not a dry hole. And it tells me, it gives me the grounds to make this reasonable assumption. It's commercially viable. And you're announcing a discovery, my brother. It's commercially viable. It's economically feasible. Therefore, give me some, you're in a position to give me some more. The United States Securities and Exchange Commission, its modernization rule for oil and gas disclosures of 2010 says once you're using available technology that you have reasonable certainty of reserves, then that has to be disclosed. Remember, these disclosures are so that investors are in a position with as much information as possible so they can make a decision to hold on to their shares or to sell them or to buy more. So there's much involved in here outside of Guyana. So why the Exxon and its part, Exxon is not telling us this, I believe it knows more. And this business about appraisal and monetizing, I don't buy that at all, that Dr. Jagdeo came up with. I don't buy that. They used to tell you immediately, well, we've got 700,000 barrels. How come the Chinese can say in their annual report that one of the discoveries, 746,000 barrels? Where did they get that from? I think it has to do with the contract. Outside of the money you're talking about, Dr. Adams, where if more, you got a billion barrels here and 2 billion there, and it adds up to, let's say, 15, 20 billion barrels. There's going to be pressure on the government and more clamor for renegotiation of the contract.
Yep.
Second question.
Yeah.
Education, labor union contract. Teachers' pay. Should government return to the bargaining table? Vincent?
Well, absolutely, without question. And again, I've been saying the most important, oil is only going to be here for 20 or 30 years the most, okay? So what you've got to do, you've got to create a country that you're going to get investors. And it's a fact. The old days of infrastructure, you build it, they're going to come. That paradigm has gone. We found that out in 2008. The new paradigm it's about education. And Exxon, even Exxon would tell you that. Enough infrastructure is not even number 2. It's to follow the rule of law is 2, and then infrastructure is 3. So when you put 58% in infrastructure and you only put a mere just a few percentage in education, you've got everything turned upside down. And I did some rough calculations. And a teacher's pay, right, by the way, is the average salary for a teacher, it's 180,000 Guyana dollars. It's the lowest pay in the Caribbean for teachers. Even little bitty countries such as Grenada and Antigua and those countries are making 2 and 3 times what our teachers are making. So even with a $50,000 increase, and I, at a minimum, because that's what, even the opposition, even the current government in place when they were in opposition, they said the teachers should get $50,000. So if you give 13,500 teachers, and I think that's the number of teachers, $50,000 pay raise, that would only take, that's only 2% of that infrastructure budget. That's $14 billion. which is 2% of that infrastructure budget, the infrastructure guys would still get their 652 billion, and at least the teachers would get something that they can live a decent life. And they're the most important asset that we have got in terms of building our economy for the future. When all is gone, we've got to create where we create the environment where we can attract foreign direct investment, and it's all about education. So we've got to invest and lay that foundation in education today.
Stalemate in court. Should the government and the union return to the bargaining table?
Absolutely, without question.
And Vincent, GHK?
No question. The government has to set the example that we are a people. We have signed there's a collective bargaining agreement in place. It's valid. We are dealing with the right party. The government has to take the lead, has to be an active participant, a ready participant to continue that discussion. In terms of some things that Dr. Adams said, I have got a little different take on this, and it places me on the side of the vice president, which may astonish people right here and people who are listening. 50,000 is a nice number and it's a livable wage. But let's be, I want to be real sensitive here. Using your number of $180,000 per month as the average pay, $50,000 amount to somewhere about 25%, 25 to 30%. Yes. And that is a huge number at one drop. I mean, it's got to be at a sliding scale, because then the inflation, you have the public servants waiting. You're going to have that inflation bugbear that is waiting there to spring out of its box. We know that cost of living is killing us. So what's going to happen now is are wages going to be chasing prices, or prices chasing wages? So that's the concern that I have. I think this thing has got to be, yes, I hear the numbers. Yes, I would say that the money can be found, but I'm saying it's not 6.5% as the government has insisted, and it can't be in that steep trajectory immediately. I think it's got to be something to under 20%. People are not going to like me for saying this, but this is what I think makes sense. It's got to be a graduated scale. But bottom line to this question is, gentlemen, that the government must take the lead in the conversation at the bargaining table continuing.
Next question. The United States election, November, first Tuesday in November, Trump versus Biden. The polls had Trump ahead last week. I think Biden is gradually climbing. It could be almost a statistical dead heat now. A Trump victory or a Biden victory, good, bad for Guyana? Vincent?
A Trump victory, unquestionable for me, would be a disaster for Guyana. And just because of the geopolitics, again, I mean, we see, and I think it's now been in the open, that Trump is forming his alliance with Putin, Russia, and of course with China and that part of the world. But the most important thing is, the father of all transactionalists is Donald Trump. Venezuela, folks, and he loves to talk about oil, opening up everything in the United States for oil. Venezuela, we've got 11 billions, or even if we go up to, I don't know, 20 billion. Do you know what Venezuela's oil reserve is? 301 billion barrels of oil. So that's all that Donald Trump is he's not no political analyst or economist or anything. All he is seeing is that oil. And if push comes to shove, I'll be willing to bet you anything. If push comes to shove and he becomes the president and we've got issues, he's going to look at that 11 billion barrels versus the 301 billion barrels. I'm going to find some way to deal with Putin, and because of course Putin is aligned to Venezuela, etc. And that is my biggest worry for Guyana.
GHK?
I'll make it 30 billion. Instead of 11 and 15, I'll make it 30. And you do the arithmetic. Venezuela has 10 times the proven reserves. Some of it is heavy oil. Make no mistake about that.
Yep.
the technology is there, and you can speak to that more, but we're not talking about that here.
Right.
Look at, I go back as I did with CIA Director Burns. Look at the context of Donald Trump, gentlemen. Donald Trump is a businessman. He's a deal maker. Folks listening, Donald Trump is a deal maker. Venezuela, to him, is the art of the deal. He will look, so in many ways, I'm subscribing to what you just said. He's going to look at 300 billion barrels versus 30. 30. Cap it at 30 for the time being. It's more than that in my mind. Just guesswork. And he's going to say, this is a no-brainer.
That's right.
This is no question. We are going to have to make this work. And America has the muscle in terms of us. And Trump would have the political energy to cut some kind of deal. He's a guy who all his life has cut deals, bankruptcy deals, legal deals, business deals, everywhere.
Education deals.
You know, so here's this. This for him is another business. We like to say, you know, we should take the politicians out of government and run this thing like a business. You got Donald Trump. He's going to run here like a business. And that's not good news for us. Because, you know, we've been quarreling about the laxity of the EPA, the local EPA. Man, with Trump over there and Elton already here and running all kinds of circles around us, I can imagine that how the Guyana government will feel empowered. Hey, we don't even have to listen to you guys anymore. We don't have to respond to anything. So yes, a Trump victory is not good for Guyana. Unfortunately, in my mind also, a Biden victory, I mean, it has me doing more than scratching my head. I am just fearful of that because the guy is, I don't know where he is. And that's the problem with him. And I think the odds are, and I'm saying this in mid-April, the odds favor Trump right now.
Last question. There's been a sudden increase of violence among youths. Just a couple days ago, youths were beating up a Venezuelan kid for unjustifiable reasons. What's your take on it? The spike in violence. Either one of you can go first. Vincent?
I get, you know, you see, first of all, you know, money brings a lot of social problems, especially when certain sector of the I'm not making excuses here for crime, but when certain section of the population, when money is not getting to them, we're going to create social problems. But the most important reason behind it is because, again, we're getting back to the Human Rights Commission. We've got for want of a better word, a corrupt police force and a corrupt, you know, the whole, well, not the judicial system, because even the judicial system is being threatened. But unless we get a police force, I mean, we've been reading about what happens every day with police people involved in crimes, and so when the folks, who are supposed to be, you know, like I say, you can't put the cat to watch milk. So that's what we've got. You know, we've got a police force, and but then it starts at the top though. It's the leadership of the entire country to make sure that those institutions are functioning properly, and that's one of the key institutions that has to become non-corrupt, so to speak. So I believe that's what I think. One is a social problem, and I believe the second thing is because we do not have a police force that is not corrupt.
GHK, your take?
I think a number of factors are contributory here. One, these children don't operate in a vacuum. They see American TV. Mm-hmm. And I've never looked at local TV. I barely listen to the radio. But I'll tell you this. daily, almost daily, you see reports of brutality in schools involving young folks in different parts of the United States. And I'm not talking about the big city alone, teeming with people from all over. You're talking about middle America. We're talking about the heartland of America. We're talking about the deep south. We're talking about where places that are legendary for, yes, for racism, but for courtesy also. That's basketball games, football games. Teachers are being beaten up, etc. So there's that culture of violence that is reported on in the media in place like America, and it has transmitted to here, and there's that. Number two, role models. My God, gentlemen, when we see what goes on here, I have not seen it, but I've read it, I've written about it. What goes on in our parliament with both sides at each other's throats and in the worst possible way. What happens when our children sees that? When our children see that, some of that has to register somewhere, and so they take that plus our divide on this one involved a foreign child and who should be protected. Another one before where a child got a gate slammed in his head and he died. I think his name is Harry Paul on the East Coast. And so we have these things that all three of us, and look, the past is always looked through rose prisms lens. We dare not go say any boo to somebody on the street because it's gone home before us and they're waiting for us home. I know of instances where parents have gone, talked to the head teacher, and then gone to the classroom and get into a brawl with the teacher. Now, the children are not impervious to these developments. They see it in Parliament. When the president and the vice president takes after people in ways that just should not be, they're like, if they can do that, why can't do that too? When we see people, I see them publicly urinating, disregarding our traffic laws, adults, old and young, cussing for anything at all. There's a total breakdown. People will not like me to say this. It's bad for it. But this is the reality. There's a breakdown in discipline and courtesy and in respect. Therefore, the children are absorbable. They're absorbing these things. And you're going to have some who are going to express that. And unfortunately, you have victims when these things happen. Notice I didn't talk about gangs, and I didn't talk about drugs. I didn't talk about broken homes. I'm just talking about what the optics, what the children see, what the children are hearing in their homes, what the children are watching on the TV, what the children are possibly dealing with their peers. And so the expressions of violence come all too easily. So I think those are among the areas that has some substance to them.
So, gentlemen, I think we have had a very, very fruitful, productive, informed panel discussion tonight. And I think it's about time we close the discussion. I want to thank you very, very much for taking your very, very invaluable time from whatever affairs you had or have for joining us tonight to discuss this very, very important topic of recent visits by American officials to Guyana and the United Nations report on Guyana. Thank you very much. Good night, all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop.